You are not telling your notes right. This is why I only took English back.
Hello. My name is Emily Cinquamani, and I'm the poetry instructor here at the Governor's School, as well as the creative writing department chair. And I'm so happy to welcome you to our junior end of the year readings. I'm going to start with a quick reminder to please silence your cell phones, and also with some thank yous. Thank you so much for your support of our department. This year, thanks to the support of our community, we've been able to bring several excellent guest writers, including Michael Clune, Gabrielle Calvacaresi, Sarah Blackman, and Joni Tevis, to our campus to teach our students. And we've been able to pay for our students to enter national competitions like Scholastics and Young Arts, where several of them placed at both regional and national levels. Thank you so much for your support of our students' educational opportunities. Thank you also to my fellow creative writing faculty members, Alan Rossi, our fiction instructor, right over here. Hayreem Lee, our creative nonfiction instructor. Over there. And Austin Taylor, our playwriting instructor. This event is this group of writers' second class reading, and it marks the midway point of their time in this program. Since their first reading in the fall, they've taken creative nonfiction with Hayreem and flash fiction with Alan, and I know you'll get to hear some of the work from those classes tonight. They've also spent time reading and writing poems in strange shapes and poems inspired by art, and found poetic forms and inspirations with me, and have just started a class on the nonfiction lyric essay. They've read their work at community open mic nights at our local bookstore, M. Judson. In short, they've done more work, pushed their creative comfort zone in more genres, and presented their writing to a larger audience since the last time they were here. I think you're going to be very impressed by how much they've grown in such a short time. This is a group of writers who are down for a challenge. The amount of new work they've analyzed and new creative assignments they've tried, and their excitement in doing all of this, speaks to this group's intrepid and inquisitive nature. Their willingness to take creative and intellectual risks shows up in the excellent work you'll hear them read this afternoon. I'm very excited for you all to experience their writing. Please join me in welcoming our first reader, Lily Gavin.
Hi, I'm Lily, and I'm going to be reading a flash fiction piece called Normal. While handing the menu back to the waiter standing over him, the man asked politely if he could get the pesto pasta but with no tomatoes. After which he turned to the woman sitting on the other side of the table. His gummy teeth took up over half of his expression, and he winked. But the woman didn't reciprocate this potential exchange and instead waited for the waiter to leave, and when he did, she stared at the man and examined his flipped-up collar and his acne, and she noticed the small table made for two, the one they were sitting at, and the 2 wine glasses and the basket of breadsticks between them. And the woman was staring firmly at that smirk of his and asked him since when did he not like tomatoes. Taking a sip from his glass, he told her since forever, and this caused their eyes to lock and the woman's hips to shift, because she should have known, because these two had been going out for 126 days, a little over 4 months. And the woman knew that because she had been counting. And the woman had been counting because she had to, because she cared about her relationships. So she said that he never told her he didn't like tomatoes, because she wanted him to know that she was a good listener. But he quickly said she never asked him, while pulling his body back in his chair, and he looked at his watch. Yet not to look at the time, but to give him an excuse not to look at her reaction, because he knew that she wanted to win. However, the man admired her competitiveness early in their relationship, because they asked questions that didn't hold weight, and those questions opened up mysteries that prompted him to tell his friend she pushed him to be better. And so then the woman explained that she's asked lots of things, and she kept her back straight and waited for his response and scratched her scalp with her fresh acrylics and tugged on the slicked hair she had done an hour prior. He then said he never said she didn't. And he swung forward to hold her hand, but she pulled her arms under the table before he could. So he attempted to derail, and she slightly looked away and allowed her eyes to roll, but he didn't see. And so she let the conversation dismantle, despite the fact she didn't want to change the topic. So as they discussed updates on work and asked each other how family was going, the waiter came back with the two's food and placed it down in front of them before quickly leaving. And the man glared at his plate, and the woman wanted to laugh, but she waited, and he slumped his shoulders and asked the woman if he should ask the waiter to take it back, but the woman said it was fine and that he should just eat them. But in reality, she wanted to tell him to be normal. Eventually, he took his fork and stabbed into one of the cherry tomatoes that lay on the top of the green noodles, and he said that she was right, and that it was time to try something new. And for the first time, she really smiled, and she watched him as he slowly brought his fork up to his mouth. He hesitated, then took half a bite out of it, but before the woman could congratulate him on being a man, he gagged and knelt his head over the plate and spit out the slimy bite of tomato, and a long string of saliva hung from his mouth before he closed it. And the woman's disgust plastered over her face, and she said, "Ew," and he wiped his mouth with his hand, and she didn't know what to do but explain. So she explained to him that he's too old to not like tomatoes, and she asked him who the hell doesn't like tomatoes, and she continued about how she didn't know that he didn't like tomatoes, and she sighed and said he doesn't tell her anything, and asked him why he always avoids things like this. And he looked at her with an estranged face, and his cheeks were flushed from her comments, but he readjusted himself and asked her what she was even talking about. At this point, the other tables inside the restaurant had vanished, and there were no longer waiters rushing by and other couples eating beside them, because all they could see were each other. And the woman told him that it felt like she didn't know him at all. But the man explained that it had only been a couple of months and that she wasn't giving him a chance. And she stopped and corrected him. "It's almost been 130 days, she said. That's way over a couple months." And he sat there confused and asked her if she had been counting this whole time. And she said yes, proudly. And the two sat there for a moment thinking to themselves, how weird. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dakota Long, and I will be reading a creative nonfiction piece called A Psychological Reversal, it discusses certain psychological concepts such as ancestral memory, instinct, and resistance. Instinct is the inclination of a living thing towards a certain behavior, such as walking in most bipeds and quadrupeds and flying in birds. Any behavior is instinctive if it is performed without being based upon prior experience, without learning it, and is an expression of the biological factors the living thing gained from its parents. Tea in the United Kingdom is hot and bitter and comes in many types: white, green, black, and different flavors: chai, Earl Grey, ginger, chamomile, peppermint. In the South, sweet tea is the only tea that exists. Brewed hot with sugar stirred in and left to cool in fridges. It is completely unlike the fancy teas Brits love, but I appreciate the taste, as long as I don't reach the sticky bottom of the melted together sugar that refuses to dissolve, that slimy invader. Imprinting is a sort of instinct. The first thing an animal sees when it's born is their mother. Whether it's true or not, their brains make that connection in a snap. When I was born, my hair was a light strawberry brown. I was pale, reddish. My eyes were squinty. When I saw my mother stitched up, dark-haired and tanned, I didn't imprint on her. For a solid moment, she wasn't my mother, not until my hair darkened to her blackish tone. I've had to adapt to survive in the sunny South despite it not being the place I belong in. There is some correlation between it and the place most of my blood is poured from. The Appalachian Mountains and the Scottish Highlands are geographically the same mountain range, formed over 400 million years ago when North America and Europe were connected as part of Pangaea, splitting 200 million years ago. It makes sense that at least 250,000 Scots settled in the Appalachians pre-American Revolution. In psychoanalysis, resistance is an individual's efforts to repress certain drives, feelings, or thoughts from being integrated into conscious awareness. Resistance in this context is seen in therapy and is commonly described as a defense mechanism against powerful emotions like fear, shame, or guilt, acting as a barrier to therapeutic change. Brexit is a portmanteau referring to the day, January 1st, 2020, on which the UK formally left the European Union. From then on, the EU law and the Court of Justice of the European Union no longer have primacy over British law. As of January 2026, 6 years later, 58% of British people polled say they regret leaving the EU. Brexit is much like the actions a rebellious teenager would take, though Britain is much too old to take such actions, having formally been around for a millennia now. Ain't is the formal contraction of am and not, are and not, and is and not. In elementary school, I lived in western North Carolina, in the Appalachian Mountains, either around or in Asheville. When I said ain't, the teacher wouldn't correct me, but the other kids would. Ain't isn't a word, they'd say, but I'd say ain't is a word as much as isn't is. A British similar to ain't is in it. I have to focus on what's happening right now to avoid spiraling into what's to come. I have to think of things that are recent. Alan Rickman died 5 years ago, so I don't have to think about the new HBO rendition of the Harry Potter books. I won't watch them because it's not the same without Alan Rickman. The child actors have grown up: Daniel Radcliffe, Emma Watson, Rupert Grint, Tom Felton, Matthew Lewis. If I had been alive sooner, if I had been 11 when the first movie came out, maybe I would feel more strongly about the new show. I would hate it more because it would replace the characters I grew up with, an ocean and a world away. I could pull away from it all and start over. Each time I moved houses, I'd act differently. When I moved from North to South Carolina, I cut my hair short and dyed it purple. I got blonde streaks later on, replicating them when I was to go to boarding school. I turned into someone people will like, pick up on what people are like, and become a fresh and new Dakota Long. I'll do this when I move to the UK. I'll leave my sunglasses at home and keep my eyes peeled everywhere I go. The unconscious mind is a part of the human psyche that is not available to introspection, that cannot be studied. Although these processes exist beneath the surface of our conscious awareness, they are believed to have an effect on our conscious thought and behavior. North Carolina is ranked number 12 in education. South Carolina is number 43. Though I grew up in a more intelligent southern state, one of the highest consistently with some of the best colleges in the region, I always looked towards becoming the best. I wanted to be valedictorian one day, but at my school, there is no such thing as valedictorian. Only 2 lists, dean's list and president's list, the latter better than the former. Just as I teared up in 8th grade when I was elected to AB honor roll, I cried when I was announced to be on the dean's list, 1B, 189 for the semester. Even in a quote-unquote low-ranking state, I was a low-ranking student. In terms of international academic prowess, the UK ranks 16th, whereas the US ranks 31st. Surely I would fail in a UK school. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Tully. I'm from Anderson, South Carolina, and this is my piece, A Ballad, a Bass, and a Breath of Fresh Air. It is a nonfiction essay that talks about me learning piano when I was in the 4th grade to how I got to the school. In the context, this is right after I got to the governor's school summer program and moved into my dorm room for the summer. We arrived around the same time to our dorm room in mid-June. The first week was a little strange. A lot of unfamiliar faces, and I still thought I was possibly the worst artist here. I kept myself preoccupied, reading One Piece manga and playing on my Nintendo Switch. Then there was a dance. I'd been cooped up and thought it might be good to try and be a little social. I wore a blazer I'd probably purchased for like $10 at a cosplay a few months prior. Instead, Jackson and Caden and I all dressed up in our snazzy outfits for a casual dance and started playing poker with chips. No illegal betting. People gathered around, and we even did a photo shoot. Then we persuaded the DJ to play songs from the Lorax, and the courtyard of art students recreated the ending of the movie where everyone sings Let It Grow. For the next hour, I danced around in that blazer, somehow I felt setting my skin ablaze under the setting summer sun. By the time it was over, I was ecstatic. I hadn't had that much fun since the Southwood Dance. That's where the similarities begin. The second week, I saw similarity after similarity. I finally understood the Govey environment. As the week progressed, even a turn down the hallway was deja vu to Southwood. When my mom picked me up on June 30th, she asked me all about it. After the first 10 minutes, I told her what I don't think I ever expected to say. I wanted to go to the governor's school. The environment was so much like the middle school I loved so dearly and had so little of what I hated about my high school Hannah. I felt in my element for the first time in 2 years, and I kept that momentum going into my sophomore year. I spent the first 2 months writing story drafts and practicing my writing ability. I was filling the notebook I'd purchased in an Atlanta Barnes & Noble quickly. Then Hurricane Helene hit. I went from writing every other day to not writing at all. Instead of writing, I observed. The day after the storm hit, I took a long walk across the street. I wanted to see the full devastation of the storm. I saw trees collapse with the ground dragged out beneath it as well. The next day I was working. I worked Sunday and Monday and Wednesday, and someone cut out Thursday, so I might as well have been making some money. Most everywhere was closed. In Clemson, in Anderson, in Pendleton, anywhere that wasn't Greenville, everywhere was closed. So the restaurant was packed. I didn't even have time to eat. I worked all 4 shifts on empty stomachs. Hurricane Helene was possibly the most hectic thing that has come to Anderson since I moved there in 2014. Nonetheless, there was also good. After those shifts, I'd go downtown until midnight playing card games with friends and having a few too many Wendy's burgers. Watching the darkness along the roads slowly turn brighter and the stars slowly disappear from the sky. After a pretty fulfilling week, I went for a bike ride. I rode across my neighborhood, watching the sun set. I observed the moths swarming around the streetlights. The next day, I left for a pre-planned trip to Canada. At nearly 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on a Canadian Royal Airline plane, I was looking out the window, probably somewhere in the air over Minnesota. A thick sea of clouds below me, I started thinking up a story. I grabbed the notebook containing all of my drafts with its nice leather case that pictured the Great Wave, and a dull pencil I'd brought along. I finished 2 other drafts where I experimented with different styles. Then I wrote a short story about a man who had a battle with mental health. The story contained lots of stormy imagery, most of it consisting of all those observations I'd made during Hurricane Helene. When I got back to Anderson, I typed out the story. I showed it to a few friends in Miss Paradise, refining it based on their feedback. After a few months, and specifically one difficult letter of recommendation to get, I submitted my application for the residential program. 4 months later, I was building Lego for an annual competition I participated in called the Soiree. I was on call with my best friend Ellis at the time. I got a phone call from Greenville, and while I typically don't answer phone calls because whoever used to have my number before me answered all the scam calls, I answered this one because I heard that the call for the auditions might be coming today. I answered it. It was Alan, the fiction teacher at Governor's School. He was letting me know that I'd been accepted into the Governor's School for creative writing. The moment was so jaw-dropping for me. I never thought I'd go this far with the quill, nor would I have ever thought some basic scales and chords would lead me to the quill. Honestly, part of me never thought I would have picked up creative writing in the first place. Nonetheless, I did. But would I have done that if my late grandfather had not bought that piano? Without that piano, I would have never learned how to read music in the old beaten-down house by Anderson University. Learning how to read music allowed me to start performing at the Concord Talent Show. And as much as those years were filled with negative experiences, it showed me there was a stage for what I do, a stage I would have left forever without that upperclassman who encouraged me to keep going after I messed up. My admittance to Southwood, from there I auditioned for Southwood, and my admittance to Southwood allowed me to become engaged in the arts. But more importantly, it allowed me to have my 7th grade English class with Miss Paradise. Nearly everything that has happened to me in the last 5 years has some relevance to Miss Paradise. Without her, I would have never become so interested in creative writing, which was realistically the only thing I would have gone to the summer program for. Furthermore, her advice, willingness to help, and support allowed me to get into the summer program that reminded me why I love the arts, and then strangely joined the craziness of a major hurricane, both of which guided me to write the story I used to get into school and write this paper. What got me here is what makes life truly amazing. It's how many different variables happen in each person's life to get them somewhere, and we don't even think about all these crazy little coincidences every single day. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Caroline Moore, and today I'm going to be reading 2 pieces. The first is a flash fiction piece called Evolution. He finds a copper kettle in one of the cupboards, so he fills it, places it on the burner, but doesn't light it yet. and the little action makes him feel safe, makes him a man returned to the simple wilderness. So he sighs contently and lays on the couch with the plaid-patterned pillows, so he can let his mind drift, so a muse can reform his life or something, but he just gets a bit bored and uncomfortable, and maybe he thinks he's restless because his bags are still packed, and the task is stubbornly lurking at the back of his mind, even though it doesn't have a deadline. So he brings his suitcase to the main suite, a cozy, natural room right out of Heidi, and there's wood paneling on the walls and a single window to chase away the darkness, and a quintessential bearskin rug that he hopes is fake, and a bed with a quilt and 2 pillows that he could have shared with someone if he'd brought someone, but he didn't know anyone that would want to go into the woods for a week, and he can't blame them because it had been a hassle to take off work and drive out here and stop in town to get basic groceries, and remembering the food makes him think that he's restless because he's hungry, so he ignores the kettle he filled and makes some pasta that takes 10 to 12 minutes to cook, even though he knows he could make a 3-course meal if he wanted to, but he doesn't even make a sauce, just mixes in some olive oil, and he knows there's basil on the patio that would make the food a little less sad, but he's too focused on eating dinner to get some. And when he's finished, he puts on his hiking shoes and forces himself to pay attention to every twitch of the landscape around him. The birds singing and something rustling in the bushes, but eventually the green that was a relief to his eyes just blurs the looming trees together. And he can't even find a weird bug or unusual mushroom, and he's waiting for the moment when he realizes everything around him is alive or connected or something. But the sky is getting darker, so he goes back to the cabin to clean himself up. And he knows he could use some bubble bath, listen to music on the radio, boil himself in the lavender scent. And he could daydream or find pictures in the bubbles or feel the hair swirl on his legs. But he showers instead because he has relaxing to do, and relaxing does not mean being bored. And he puts on his pajamas and thinks that this is nothing like a Thoreau novel. And the mention of this author makes him wonder what books might be here, so he starts scanning the shelves, and he finds some mindless murder mystery book, where the plot is just interesting enough to keep him hooked, but not something so complex that he'll stay up trying to analyze every line. But his eyes are so unused to reading something that's not an email that he can't focus, and he can't find it in himself to care about the characters because he meets people like them every day, and he came here to experience something different. So he tries again to embrace the hermit spirit by throwing some logs into the fireplace and trying to remember how to conjure a spark, which his father taught him how to do when he turned 13, one of those outdated American coming-of-age rituals. His father saying, "Son, if you're ever lost in the woods, this is how you make a fire." And he tries to do it with the bare minimum, just some shredded kindling and a flimsy match. But after a few attempts, he goes to the kitchen and finds a lighter, which he's much more familiar with, as he smoked for many years. Though he only did it because everyone around him did, and joining them made him feel so much more educated and mysterious, because all the great artists had their vices. And he wouldn't really consider himself an artist, but he likes to sketch in his rare free time. So after he lights a fire, he retrieves his sketchbook and a pen and sits under the blanket, and all he manages to draw is the room from his point of view, which still somehow ends up messy and rushed, though he had forced himself to take at least 15 minutes on it. And he thinks maybe drawing something from his mind will help him be a little more creative, but all he's able to come up with is a design for a lipstick advertisement, even though he told himself he wouldn't do any work for the next week. And he's completely stuck on what to do in this foreign world that his ancestors and his species evolved to live in, the world that he was made for at one point in time. And when the introspective deer softly pat onto the back lawn, he goes onto the patio and yells at them, just so he can feel like there's some sort of life around him, that he's not the only one the trees are ignoring. And my second piece is a poem called Pins and Patches. When you turn 4,745 days old, you can't keep your mouth shut, always needing to stick up for our dying planet or for the rights that come with being human, ruining Thanksgiving dinner with a manifesto. You are like a 5-year-old, meant to be seen, not heard. But unlike a 5-year-old, you can't stick chewing gum in a kid's hair, can hardly even blow a big bazooka bubble anymore, so might as well dye your own hair a bright pink. And no, you can't stay out late, you damn delinquent, even though you used to play house in the Wolfridden woods long after sundown, making witch potions for the sick children the government wouldn't help, and working at a pie store to feed your 3 children and 1 dog. But you don't play now. You would have to relearn how to frolic and skip. So now you hang out with the other pin jacket punks, listening to The Clash and learning how to sew patches and figuring out how to inhale cigarette smoke together, because these degenerates say that no, your breath is not too loud. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ava Gregory, and I'm going to be reading a flash fiction piece titled Acting Like Animals. It is all one sentence. You like method acting as a writer, so you like to live by show, don't tell, every day. And I don't write nor act, but I did study animal behaviorisms, so I can see what you're trying to say. I've known you for years, my daughter. I've gotten used to this. You like method acting, and I'll read whatever's displayed on your face instead of trying to lure words out of you, like making a sick rooster crow. Though I don't know if they stop when they're sick, so you and those hideous birds have something in common from the way you scream, and keep it up. And when you scream at me, it's just your face moving soundlessly. It distorts. So stop it, I say. And you point all around the room and gesture to the problems you have with my life, gesture to the dead animals on my walls, acting like you haven't seen them the whole goddamn time. You were just acting, I yell. Your eyes widen and your fight turns to flight. You back into an antler-filled corner where you act like they weren't there, and you act like I put them there to hurt you. And you squawk and shuffle and collapse and grovel. You grovel at my feet. In my head, you say, I'm sorry, but in reality, you mumble trembling exclamations. They fall to the floor alongside your tears. So I take off and sprint across the room. Yanking my gun off the wall, I swing the door open and slam it shut behind me. Our backyard is really just forest, but there's no cool, refreshing air because it's the middle of a hellish, humid summer, and I feel minnows of sweat tickling the back of my neck. I continue through the brush, which bothered me less than the damp spot on the back of my shirt, and I hear a rustle, so I pause. Wait, because I wouldn't mind nabbing a little squirrel right about now, less risk and the same amount of reward. I don't care much for what I'm shooting right now, as long as it ends up on my wall too. It's easier, more procedural than analyzing classic literature or trying to do whatever the hell you do in your school, probably taking classes on how to come up with more vagueness for me to sort through. I take a breath, because the heat and friction of my thoughts racing distracted me. My breathing scared the squirrel away. The squirrel can't talk, but it shows its fear, all the same, except you're a grown-ass adult flitting around like wide-eyed prey. I take a breath. I crouch down in the brush and observe. A sickly wind wringing the trees out. No leaves fall, but the grass whispers. It's too tired to put up with the summer for much longer. And if I can hear what the damn grass is saying, then I think that also says something about you. I take a breath, and there's a smell of moist earth, something rotting nearby. And I'm hoping the essence of squirrel, and sure enough, there he is, perched up on a tree. Though before I take aim, I hear bigger, greater, stronger rustling just a few yards away. So I pause, wait, following its movements as best I can through the shadows. It's gotta be a deer, maybe even a really, really early bear. Trying not to get myself giddy, I stalk after it little by little, fairly deep in the woods. I continue barely feeling pinprick needles or jagged leaves scrape my exposed skin. A big enough catch makes up for anything else that could have happened today, so I pick up with eagerness, and somehow it doesn't spook, but I slow down again just in case. I think I can practically smell it. It's almost floral. It's whispering to me a song of sweet victory, and it's whispering, oh, the satisfaction of the kill would make your life worth it again. Because my hobby isn't an addiction, but going a while without a trophy does tend to give me a sense of restlessness. And now the creature pauses. I pause too, waiting. And I feel all the sweat collect in a pit in my stomach because it's you. I sprint forward, yelling, what the hell are you doing here? And you wince. You say, I need to get some fresh air. I wanted to find you. But the air out here carries nothing. The grass has gone quiet, and you're acting like you came out here because you care. So you squeak out a sorry, and I feel nothing but disappointment and shame, and a little grateful for my pause. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jackson, and I have 2 poems to read today. The first is called Bonfire. Goodbye to the boy. Goodbye to the bonfire he lit in the middle of the woods. Goodbye to the moments when he danced around it as snow and ash fell in sheets on his shoulders. It's burned out now, but the ash blows come winter. Wind and ash coat the front yard. Wind and ash bury a cross beneath a mass of monochrome, wring oxygen from the frigid air. Debris blows through the window, smoke and char. The boy's mother, she twists dirty water from dish rags, blinks water from her eyes, the ash or something else, but the boy doesn't know which. He glances up from the 3-chair dinner table, past his mother, out the window before he stands, unexcused from the table. The door slams and the boy runs. Sneakers plow concrete until he's in the woods. before the bonfire, and snow falls, mixed with sleet as the pyre grows grayer, bleeding hazy fog onto the treetops, endless blindness in gray, not an orange ember, but the boy's face is crimson in the woods. His mother coughs from the window of the kitchen as the boy clicks a lighter and crumples newspaper clippings. Lighter fluid and paper, thin paper. A brief hesitation. He sees a ghost or fog in the form of one before the sticks as click. He flicks the lighter. The fire rages. The boy sits watching as ash dissipates from the wind. He sits and watches while smoke plumes. The ash is no more. No more. Burns and burns. Watches and watches. My second piece is called What If a Quasar Beam Killed Us All 8 billion years ago? Has an epigraph. Quasar, a massive and extremely remote celestial object emitting exceptionally large amounts of energy. What if we all died 8 billion years ago, but we never knew, and it was the quasar beam that did it? Born in a star system 8 billion light years away, when a baby black hole more massive than the sun burped the beam out after its first meal of a neutron star, spinning at almost the speed of light. And it came hurtling at us as that star's rotation turned into ceaseless motion. I'll bet that it burned other solar systems and other Earths along the way, that our tiny rock in space is just Earth number 100,000 because there were so many like it. What if I'm living in the last billion years and my expected lifespan is meaningless? My existence just a decimal dust speck, a single pinprick of stardust in the ever-dripping astral hourglass that contains our remaining time. What if the world and I share a final moment, and my last inhale is the scorching exhale of the laser, burning us away, because it could only be 70 years away, 70 light years, and my every moment was a flashback to childhood mornings at Grandma's dining table, breakfast sizzling in the other room as she tells the 8-year-old me over morning pancakes, life flashes before your eyes when your time is up. But I'd never understand it until I see a black hole's jet approaching me near light speed, igniting the atmosphere in a plume of cosmic inferno, and I realize that my every second was a beloved memory. So what if I rest my eyes and smile as the beam envelops me? As everything I ever was, every echo of third-degree stovetop burns rises as dust around me while the beam makes its impact. What if a life of knee scrapes means nothing now, and all the Band-Aids from Grandma, the ginger tea, the kisses on the cheek remain real to me in a final, infinite instant? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Charlie Trupp, and I'm going to be reading a poem today. In bed, late at night. If you could grab at it, the string of happenings in life, the moment in which it became impending, that you will become something, and more so, possibly, that you could be nothing at all. When the stressed bowstring shoots its sharpened arrow through the wind, penetrating the feathered chest of an innocent swallow, and you watch as the arrow falls to the ground in imbalance with its little body, measuring what that means by all of the possible branches of worlds where things did or didn't. The millisecond in which only a single sentence began to take up the same amount of space an entire lifetime would. That the two of you are the same, and it's haunting. That somehow in its beady little eyes you saw yourself, and somehow in yours it saw itself too. It becomes all you see, spelled out in some simple font, nothing fancy. It's a question that poses as a fact without disguise. If tomorrow you'll be any closer to becoming the person you really want to be. The overwhelming moment at just 4 years old, when your mother held a blade to your neck and then was torn away from you. When the urge to prove you deserve to be alive more than the hunted overtakes the prey's mind. Then there become drastic requirements for reparation, and life no longer arbors its opportunity to be lived by you. Instead by your dupe, who either always succeeds or always fails. You're pondering the life of the man who taught you to hunt, who he was, what they made him out to be in his speech, a great man with a life of virtue, because all men are good men after they die. You're wondering if it's better this way, that he's gone, and you're left with a puzzle of the worst ways to cope, and you have to piece it together completely invertedly, even though you already know it is, because at least now he can't complicate it any further. It makes you cry, stiff cotton sheets bunched in your fist, soft pillows behind your back, spilling feathers from tiny rips you can't quite find, and a screen in front of you where you'll search up for the 100th time how to be truly free. And about 1 billion results will come up, but there really is no answer. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Isabella Arwood, and I will be reading my flash fiction piece today titled The One-Eyed Librarian. The old librarian was the only thing Jamie ever complained about. The only thing she talked about, too, unless it was about her mother. The librarian wasn't what I would call a strange woman, but is someone who would seem odd to someone like Jamie. Personally, I wasn't a huge fan either, but I wasn't as passionate as Jamie had been about it. Jamie's mother had always been that way, too. Once, when Jamie was young, her mother created a giant spectacle in the grocery store, all because Jamie couldn't stop sneezing. Turns out the poor dear had been allergic to flowers they were looking at earlier. The librarian was an older woman, short and plump, with makeup thick enough not to do its job. It only points out her wrinkles more. Waxy red lipstick on her teeth, bright clumpy eyeshadow, foundation that's not quite her shade. I still haven't decided whether it's too light or too dark. It's all just a very garish sight. I'm sure you could imagine. And don't even let Jamie get started on her clothes. She wore lots and lots of florals. It's just too many florals, Jamie would say. And an abundance of jangly jewelry. The type of jewelry a librarian shouldn't own. Loud and obnoxious. Jewelry Jamie despises herself. I haven't seen her wear anything other than a simple string of pearls. Elegant, classic, you really can't go wrong. Maybe that's why Jamie hated the librarian so much. Maybe it was the heavy makeup and the loud jewelry that really upset her, or maybe it was the hacking and coughing. Jamie always said she was coughing. I remember days prior to the incident, she said it was the type of cough that would grind your gears so much you eventually want them to stop breathing altogether. I understood what she meant, but I couldn't say something so rude. For the most part, Jamie was kind enough not to let silly things affect her. She ignored all of those things. She was a perfect lady, after all. She knew when to let things go. No, it wasn't any of that nonsense. I think it was the watching Jamie would complain about that really got to her. Glances over the shoulder, looks peering through shelves, that type of thing. No matter where Jamie went, she said she couldn't find a place not to be watched. All I want is privacy. Day and night, that's all she'd say. I think it's safe to say it was the watching that made her want to let this librarian know she had forgotten her manners. I mean, she had. She had forgotten all of them. Forgotten to wipe her teeth with a napkin, forgotten to change her foundation shade once she'd gotten older, forgotten that blue is a gaudy color to put on one's eyelid, forgotten jewelry isn't for librarians, forgotten she's a librarian altogether and that means she should be quiet. I would have liked to tell her these things myself, but no, I said none of these things, because I shouldn't. Jamie used to follow the rules, even the hard ones. At least that's what everyone else is told. But even if this weren't true, I think she wouldn't have told them otherwise. That is improper. But you see, Jamie had plenty of reasons to hate the librarian, motives that I'm sure would make anyone go mad, even myself. Despite this, for a long time, she hadn't. She stayed sensible. She would have forever if the librarian hadn't asked her that, if she hadn't blamed her. I believe Jamie would have remained more sensible than anyone. I truly believe this in my heart. But, of course, the librarian did open her grotesque red lips and did just that. Did the only thing Jamie couldn't possibly handle, being blamed. A sensitive girl, really. More specifically, being wrongfully blamed. As you could tell by now, unless you're incompetent, Jamie was designed to glide over life with a record unmarked. Anyone could see that. Well, almost perfect. In 11th grade, she had gotten a dress code violation. She never forgot it. She never let anyone forget the teacher who did it, too, Miss Fletcher. But that didn't matter much. No one else could use that against her, not in the real world. Therefore, merely suggesting she had done something wrong was, well, wrong. That was just wrong. I dare say it makes sense now why Jamie did what she did. But still, what a shame she had done it. She was still so young, and the lady wasn't so bad. I mean, sure, she wasn't dignified in her daily life, but I'm afraid that didn't matter much. She was just a librarian, and it is oh so hard to find another after what happened. No one wants to replace her, and the librarian has made it clear she isn't coming back. I understand it must be hard to see with only one eye. After Jamie took a pencil to it, the doctor said the whole thing had to go. You would think they might be able to fix it, but I suppose not. My sister's cousin's brother is a doctor, and he told me when they removed the eye, one of the new nurses accidentally dropped it. Can you believe it? Dropped it. I can imagine it rolling across the floor like a gumball. They say the librarian didn't even fight back at first. She just screamed. When she snapped out of her idiotic head, she managed to get Jamie off of her, which I'm sure wasn't hard. Jamie was extremely thin. A librarian with one eye would be improper too, so it's most likely for the best. I wonder if she'll wear an eye patch. I know I would. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Catherine Duenas. I'm from Sumter. I'll also be reading a flash fiction piece entitled Identify. It's also all one sentence. Sorry. I am in line for my sandwich at a shop on my 15-minute lunch break, which is called Diamond Joe's, and I have ordered the Diamond Joe special sub without mayonnaise on account of my egg allergy and without ham on account of my distaste for it, especially in this murky, sloppish rain, and I have places to be, and it is being made by a Joe, described by his name tag, greasy mid-40s, maybe the saddest man alive, whom I presume is the aforementioned Diamond Joe, but upon looking to the wall behind him as he slices my bread, white bread, Italian with 5 special herbs and spices, on that wall is a lengthy line of portraits portraying Diamond Joes, many of them in their mid to late 40s, by my estimation, all of whom are Italian, by my estimation, although I imagine I, and a tender of many an Italian sandwich with cold cuts and a variety of other toppings, such as cheese or peppers or various oils, typically owned by a direct patrilineal dynasty, shop, would be able to identify an Italian with some amount of ease and thus accuracy. And in the glossy ichors of his eyes, I think for a moment he sees me for my curling locks. But no, he is deaf to the intricacies of the world, so nevertheless I find myself, my eyes, wandering in the swath of Diamond Joes, as Diamond Joe, the man before me, slathers the Diamond Joe, the sandwich, and Diamond Sauce, as Diamond Joe, the pictures, peer on from their ebony cases, and all the world melts in melancholy monotony, it being 8 in the afternoon, evening, and raining some grey murk which is consequently hurled at the floor-to-ceiling windows by passing, screeching cars. And this sandwich is taking a terribly long time, and I really want to be anywhere else other than Diamond Joe's, the establishment, which is, by my count, 130 years old, and as such the building seems to slag and lurch in towards some central point of failure nearest to the men's bathroom, where Diamond Joe, the first, died, as the large placard situated above the bathroom door, orbited by grand golden swirls, a mahogany frame, indicated, just as Diamond Joe the fourth, by my count, hoarsely yowled that only paying customers get the John, which is the service that makes a business last 130 years, and as such circumstance stands me before the lunch counter, where I attempt to converse with the sopping, sullen Joe, starting with "Lousy weather, eh?" A classic opener, which he, a layman, heartily accepts with, "You know it, boss," and a little gravel that means he is a real man, as his father before him, and he speaks to me in this voice, and I know I have stolen his heart. And I broach the topic of his diamondhood by saying, "So you're Diamond Joe, or just Joe?" And he expels air in such a way that is not a sigh, but not anything else, but a feeling of being lost in his own home, it being his home, I assume, being an oft purveyor of subway slingers such as these, the dinky apartments above it, the clanking rusted countertop, tacky neon open signs, that slick on the sticky patch on the floor that keeps you on your toes. And Joe the Fourth says, "Yeah, 5th in line to the throne." And I feel a scorching white steel beam thrust down my spine and out my back and say, "Oh yeah, sure." And he says, "Yeah, my 6th year taking up the title." And he squirts some unrequested red wine vinegar onto the bread, a lot, as he turns the dials on the toaster oven to toast the bread. And he performs this series of actions with the effortless dexterity of the lowland gorilla, the sub being launched into the toaster, catching airtime along its trajectory. And I realize that the sandwich hadn't even been toasted yet. And Diamond Joe V says to me, "You know, we got boys back there in the kitchen. We call it the arena. And those boys, I mean, and I tilt and nod my head graciously, piously, studying his demeanor. And he has surely said some things along these lines to various radio interviewers. They've been cooking with the Joes was like me for 20 years now, like he'd say on some semi-weekly ballyhoo, as he and his fathers before him have. And he wraps my sandwich, and his eye twinkles, and he slaps the little sticker, peeled from the dainty, squealing roller, on the wrap. And we stand there looking at the sandwich for a little while, as the rain drizzles down outside, petering out as it should be, and the fans spin as they should, and the Joes look as they should. The man, the men, the sandwich, sloppy, turned and turning. And I say to him, as I look him in the eye, as he holds my Diamond Joe's special sub, as we feel each other's heat, fingertips bristling against fingertips, to become brothers. And I say, "So why are you guys, like the place, and you, I guess, and the first guy, like, why Diamond Joe's, what is that?" And he says, "What?" And I go, "Eh?" And he sort of waves, and he says, "Like a diamond, like baseball, right? Like baseballs." And I look, and the restaurant is baseball themed. And I leave with my sandwich, and I am sitting alone in some near enough porta potty going through the motions of flooding, and the bread is sullen and saturated and sogging out of my hands and through my fingers. And I look, and I hear a knock on the door, and I drop the sub and the slurp of water. And I have to steady my hands, and I take a careful step forward, and slip a little, and twist, and pull the door open, but there is nothing outside but the whole world. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sarah Rufino, and I'll be reading an excerpt from a nonfiction essay I wrote about bullying called Deeds versus Doers. My mother has always raised me to be compassionate, that those who hurt others are hurt themselves, and that we should give them sympathy and understand their situation. 1 out of 5 kids are bullied anyway, so I gave out my best efforts with the classmates I knew were struggling. I paid no mind to the special needs kid as he'd ask me how to speak Taco Bell during our Brazilian unit. On occasion, he'd have episodes where he threw chairs or screaming fits, and everyone turned their heads and looked away. Yet in this moment, the kids who looked away from his meltdowns were looking and laughing, not at him, but with him. That didn't make it okay. Public Health Post states over 50% of students disciplined for harassment or bullying are white. However, they are also the second most likely to report bullying, only 9.8% behind Black or African American students. The majority of my middle school students and staff were set at the lighter side of the color palette. One could argue in the end it didn't matter. Almost anything that was reported was never taken seriously. The big things were the fights, as kids would crowd around to watch 2 girls ripping each other's hair out and clawing desperately at each other's necks with their acrylic nails. They'd get ISS, or maybe disciplinary courses at best. They roomed with the rest of us until they'd snap, like the cheerleader that overdosed in the cafeteria bathroom, who was arrested as soon as she was released from the hospital, because that's what administration prioritized. Despite encouragement and efforts made by anti-bullying advocates, kids in disadvantaged positions have too much to lose in reporting a case that could possibly not be followed through. When your parents work 2 jobs to afford rent and food, they don't have the extra time to volunteer for PTA meetings like stay-at-home mothers do. So upon a biased jury, how much more likely are you to say something when you have nothing to lose? This isn't a statistic that can be measured on votes or scales, but on impact. A set court date means nothing if the judge is already bribed. National Voices for Equality, Education, and Enlightenment claim that certain youth want power and control over people because they feel they don't have power in their own lives. They seek to control and intimidate others to gain the power that they lack. Growing up with prejudice can form internalized hatred that spurs into jealousy, projecting anger onto people who have it quote-unquote better than them, in an effort to feel better about themselves. That's what I was told bullying was, that they're the ones suffering themselves. I understood the empathy, but I didn't think that was a valid reason enough to be excusable. Hurt people still hurt others. What I didn't understand was how could a person, a kid no less, in a position of privilege and priority, by all social matters and means, have the need to kick someone while they're already down? It's not for jealousy if it's for popularity, in an effort to assert dominance and gain respect from others. What were they missing from their lives that they felt they needed to pound out of me? Most public schools require students to recite the Pledge of Allegiance every morning before homeroom. I'd always look around to see who else was silent, mouthing the words towards the floor, and the few kids who'd get reprimanded for not standing up at all. Daily, we'd say, with liberty and justice for all. Yet some of those who stand for it are just as likely to break their oaths as they do to the Bible verses on their Instagram and Snapchat bios. I remember one girl named Katie Grace, a beautiful brunette blonde with curled hair and framed glasses in my world history class. She hated me, and I disliked her right back. However, I hid that my behalf was in resentful admiration. Superficial in some ways, maybe, but I always wanted approval from someone like her. Someone with a nice house, with a nice yard, with picket fencing and a fluffy dog, 2 loving parents with 2 cars and 2 garage doors with automatic openers. Maybe that's the part of the reason I didn't like her, but I never understood what I had or did that could make her hate me as much as she did. I don't know if she remembers me, but I think about her all the time. Not because I want to, just when I see a familiar face, hear a familiar voice, have someone say a familiar thing in the same backhanded manner she knew how to express in the most gut-wrenching way possible. I wonder if she knows that. I wonder if she meant to do that. I wonder if she remembers. Thank you.
Hi guys, my name is Connor Poss, and I'm going to be reading an excerpt from my nonfiction piece that is dedicated to my mother and her mother. Donuts are half off after 6 p.m. I reach my hand towards her and feel the edge of her shirt sleeve, rub the fringe stitching between the pads of my fingers, and watch for a moment. Notice the contrast between the salmon color of the fabric and the slate stained underneath of my fingernails. It was a bad habit of mine to scrape the underside of them with a bit of pencil lead or a sewing needle, pushing around the dirt and bits of red from the playground, trying to remove them. I could bully away the grime, but I would often be left with the graphite residue in its place. In this memory, my grandma is wearing an orange and salmon paisley patterned shirt with white pants and Kohl's Cash jewelry. She looks beautiful. I run my fingers down her arm, her skin pale and freckled from old age, years spent crisping in the sun or drowning in the fluorescence of a hospital. I'm pale too, but in this image I can't seem to see myself as anything other than a sickly yellow. My mind sometimes holds on to things and dips them into a dog's vision, all colors drained and left yellow, green, and blue only. Most of the time, people will stick out. Here, when I focus, I can see and smell and feel everything. These moments come from my sweetest, most stinging memories, the ones where I'm spending time with my now late grandmother, where we're running the usual annoying errands and she's alive again. She's alive and I can touch her just one more time. Her arm is cold, her whole body is, and so am I. I think I'm shivering, but at age 12, I seem to find that I'm always shaking somehow. Or maybe it's just the rumble of the grocery cart under my palm. One of the wheels is a bit off and skipping over the gaps in the tile floor. She shops strictly at Ingles, as it's the cheapest and closest grocery store to her house in Winder, Georgia. I hate it here because they always have the air conditioning on full blast, even in winter, and what I hate more than that is that I'm always dripping with buckets worth of prepubescent sweat, even in the constant cold. I feel like a zombie, scalped of their soul as I meander through the low lights which tap in and out constantly, half illuminating bags of sugar on the shelf until they're flickering like the reels of a slot machine. In different yet similar ways, we had both wished to be different. We wished we could grow out of the ugliness we perceived and grow into the beauty we desired. This was something I tried to achieve through bathroom sink haircuts and dye jobs, skipped meals and painted toenails. She tried through Weight Watchers diets and other distractions. When I could be found obsessing over my physique in the bathroom mirror, she could be found avoiding her feelings with an afternoon spent napping to the sound of Days of Our Lives. What she did not understand, outside of her objective and actual present beauty, was that I found her beautiful, heavenly even. When I watched her sing in the church choir, soprano and smiling, I thought nothing of how her shirt fit her or if her hair looked flat. I thought her voice sounded like an angel's. Or when I listened to the clicking of her French tips against the white backing of a domino, the sound bouncing around her dining room and my mind like a ray of light inside of a dark cave. The only time I believed in God were the times I heard her laugh without worrying about the volume, or saw her smile without thinking of how white her teeth looked. I found her beauty in herself and what she surrounded herself with. Girlfriends who wore capris and ate tuna salad with walnuts in it, or the abundance of Easter decorations stored in her backyard shed. There was such grace in the simplicity of it, in the comfort of routine, which clashed with my ever-changing adolescent mind. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kat, and I'm going to be reading a creative nonfiction piece called Alba. Today, I'm in the memory where I sit with a stranger on the steps of a cathedral across from Madrid's royal palace. His name is Merida, a Chilean boy I met that afternoon while wandering the city alone in an attempt to avoid my family. It's mid-July or late July, the peak of a Madrid heat wave. A sandy-tiled plaza stretches ahead where people wander idly, some drifting toward the guided tour entrance. To the left, a white stone railing frames the skyline where tourists lean out over orange-tiled roofs and dark green masses below. I watch myself from the outside. I watch myself stare at the line where the cityscape meets blue sky. The colors begin to bleed together. I look away. I have a Coke can in my hand. For now, it's the tether that grounds me to the earth, the frozen cable that pulls me into the present, or the past, the present at the very least, where I pop the tab and drink, then offer Merida some. No thanks, he says. I see him next to me, tall and thin, wearing a black Soundgarden t-shirt with dark sunglasses pushed into his hair. I press the cold can against my scraped knee. I'd fallen on it in the driveway back home, 4,000 miles away. 4,000 miles away, where my house in South Carolina sits empty. Dust moves through the orange window light to rest on my bookshelf, my Zeppelin CDs. All of it is encased within something else, a story of my life there. I have some sort of decision to make, and this vacation is an escape, I think. It's an escape or a strange in-between liminality. When I get back home, something will be different. Maybe everything will. But now I have no idea. I am not afraid of a past or future. I am right here. It is late July, a heat wave in Madrid. I go home to Chile tomorrow, Merida says. Me too, to America. He watches me through long, curly bangs. I want to go to California, he says. I've never been, I reply. I roll the Coke can over my knee and look out at the city again. I can see the heat waves, hear the constant hum of cicadas. I lift the red can. The side of it says, Alba. What's Alba? I ask. Merida squints, as if waking from a nap. Spanish girl name, he says. It means, he pauses, searching for the English word. Then he raises his hand toward the horizon, palm flat, lifting his arm slowly upward. As the sun goes up. Sunrise, I provide. His face lights up. He turns to me, grinning. Dawn. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Harlow Pierce. I'm from Myrtle Beach and Conway, and I will be reading a flash fiction piece called Dolly. The boys were all from Bluegrass, Kentucky. They worked on the railroad in their younger days. They choked on their bourbon and forced stories down each other's throats. I always liked being at my Grandpa Dolly's on nights like these. I'd been staying at his place for the past few months because it was closer to my college, and in exchange for a free place to stay, I did the mild housework he couldn't handle anymore. This was the third time they had all gathered in the backyard like this. After the first one, I had asked Dolly how they all knew each other. All he said to me was they were the last men on earth who understood the importance of vulnerability. I sat away from the rest of them, closer to the porch, while they all burned their faces in the bonfire. The older men turned to look at me ever so often, chuckling. They laughed loudly and weren't shy to tease one another. My feet rested above a pillow Grandpa Dolly had surrendered to the dogs. Dolly sat at the tip of the circle, every boy's chair tilted just enough for it to be facing him. There was this guy I didn't recognize, younger than the rest. I remember him speaking up about an hour in, a little too confident for what he was about to say. "So what kind of man got a sissy name like Dolly?" The men stared at him, covering their disgust with subtle sips of beer, simply waiting to hear what Dolly's got to say. The man sunk into himself. I guess he had thought he was teasing around like everyone else, but this wasn't the same, and everyone but him knew that. Dolly sat up slowly, pulled his chair a little closer to the man. He leaned forward, and if Dolly were younger, you'd be sure he was about to lunge. I shook my head in a strange delight of knowing how badly this man had messed up. Dolly reached over and grabbed this man's collar. He grabbed it tighter than he had ever pulled at the dogs. The man turned his head, squinting, ready for blood, ready for Dolly to raise his skinny fist, spit in his face, and leave him for dead. Dolly didn't do that, though, as any of us other boys already knew. He just smiled and said, "You're right. Dolly was the name of my late wife. She died a few weeks after I had to leave home. I cried her name almost every night on the tracks. The other men got sick of hearing her name, and one night a man said, 'Dolly, quit whining.' And for the first time in weeks, I stopped. My tears dried, and in that moment, I could picture her there, in her lace nightgown with her braided hair, that I was the one telling her to quit whining and telling her that everything would be okay." We'd all heard this story again and again, but the silence that followed was always the same. The forgotten food on paper plates, no one was swatting away the bugs anymore. The infinite loop of time we devoted to Dolly's name gave over to the sound of a train horn filling all our ears, ringing, pulsing, burning us. Dolly looked over to me. I was staring at the sky, but I could feel his yellow glow. We all waited for the train's course to end, tussling above the rumbling dirt. Like a magnet, my head pulled itself down to face Dolly's gaze. His eyes were wide and his mouth was agape. I don't think he realized his arms still gripping at the neck of the young man, but who knows? Maybe he did. For just then, he detached them as the train's headlamp beamed through our fence, making them all shudder in incredulity, stuck between rebirth and trancing luminance, or settling for the porch light. As Dolly's body began to fade into the roaring glare, my squinting eyes could barely make out the remnants of his fading body. But as I lifted the crease of my arm to shield my brows, I saw his arm reaching out, inviting me to join. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lucia Arvizu, and today I'm going to be reading my flash fiction piece called Some Things Aren't Supposed to Make Sense. Sometimes after Abigail eats, her lungs feel clotted, like a piece of mucus is wedged inside her arteries. So she has no choice but to open the bathroom door, cut on the white LED dome light that kind of makes the room look like a hospital, and make herself sick. As she closes the door, she tries to push the lock in so that her parents won't be able to break in, but it pops back out because it's been broken for months. The only thing she can think to do is roll her eyes as if it's something that's just newly begun inconveniencing her. And honestly, she wants to forget that yesterday she told herself that she'd tell her dad so that he could have it fixed. She didn't mean for it to be a lie, but now it was, and all she can do is roll her eyes while she sets her towel and change of clothes on the floor that is covered in dust. Abigail's parents were always keen on keeping the house clean, but at that moment, she doesn't care about the dust. She cares about how the boys at school will look at her, bloated and heavy. She can't stand it, so she hits the faucet, takes a deep, exasperated breath, and feels her bones grind against her skin, and her skin grind against the hair tie around her wrist that is making her feel like she's suffocating. She rips the hair tie off her arm, picks her long blonde hair up off the back of her neck, and twists it into a bun that makes her scalp burn, and left her necklace exposed long enough for her to notice that she's still wearing it. She turns her necklace to the front to unclasp the chain because the jewelry was a key aspect of her appearance, which, unlike the dust, is something she cares about. And the realization prompts her to also take her earrings out and then throw them onto a pile of clothes that she has set up on the dirty floor of that bathroom. It looks like a jail cell to her because of those fluorescent white lights and the fact that she knows that she has to go through all the pain of the gagging, coughing, and hurling so she can sleep without feeling her bones glide along her skin and the pulse of her liver that has been hurting all week because she just couldn't stop. At least that's what she concluded after she Googled, "Why does my liver hurt so bad?" and the leading cause of liver pain was said to be eating unhealthily. She figured that it was due to the fact that she'd eaten bags upon bags of the bulk-size Halloween candy that had just been on sale in November for 75% off. Abigail loved how chocolate tasted, just as much as she loved being skinny, so she knew that after she ate the whole bag that she'd have to sit in that bathroom with the water running and throw up all the food that made her feel like she was taking up too much space. Honestly, how was she supposed to go out in public after she ate all the candy and not compare herself to the perfect thin girls who were anywhere but in this bathroom and had taken over the media in 2002 solely because they were so skinny that they looked ill? In fact, she'd have done anything to look 2000 skinny, despite the fact that the internet doctors had revealed that in doing so would one day kill her. After Abigail read about it, every time she hunched over the toilet, she prayed that God would spare her life and not let her sister or mom or dad find her dead in the bathroom, because throwing up so often was bad for the heart, and at the rate in which she was doing this, she was lucky to still be alive. So maybe she isn't too far gone, just close. Now afterward, her stomach hurts, and she needs to catch her breath, so she lays back down in her bed and thanks God that she survived, and tells him that she wants to tell him that she wishes that she could say that this would be the last time, but she knows that that would be a lie, and she won't lie to the Lord. She'd only lie to her parents and friends who keep asking her if she's okay, who know that she's not, but don't know what else to say when they hear her throw up through the thin walls of her bathroom. Thank you.
Hi, I'm KB. I'm from Hilton Head Island, and I'm going to be reading my one-sentence flash fiction piece called Chime. Do you remember when I met God on the subway and he was kind of blurry, but I couldn't really tell whether it was because I had been crying or because I just couldn't really see him all the way? He was just a sort of haze in the midst of all those people on the train, the dark and cramped underground subway train. And if I squinted, I could see the ring of light that was all over him, like an aura. And it was so warm and yet just so unfamiliar, like a much older cousin you haven't seen in a decade or so, and you can just barely remember the contours of their face, the color of their eyes. And of course there were no other open seats on the subway, so I dropped my heavy bag like a boulder onto the floor of the train and sat down next to him, all my energy gone, exhausted, and he turned to look at me, and God said, "Did you have a rough day at work?" And I said, "Yes, sir, rough day at work, sir. My boss is a jerk, and I'm all out of sick days, and my boyfriend's mad because for once I didn't leave him any lunch to eat while he sits at home and does nothing for hours on end while I work like a dog, and why am I telling you all this?" And God says, "It's okay. I'm not judging you. I'm a jerk too sometimes. Didn't you ever read the Old Testament?" And he laughed, and I finally turned to look at him, but the subway had stopped, and God turned around and got off the train. And I watched that golden man walk out of the station, his aura finally disappearing as the subway picked up again. And do you remember that? And do you remember when God and I met once again in a coffee shop, my favorite one on the way to work, the one with the blackberry coffee cake, you remember? And I'm sitting at the kind of sticky tabletop and drinking my coffee, even though I hate coffee, I need something to run on. And I'm eating my coffee cake, and God sits down across from me, and he has ordered the exact same thing. And I wondered if he had to pay for it or if it was free. And I felt like maybe I should have been a little bit scared, but I wasn't. So I asked him, "Why do you keep following me?" And he laughed again, that warm chuckle from the subway, and he said, "Why do you think I'm following you?" And I said, "Because you obviously are." And God said he goes where he needs to go, so I guess he needed to come here, to my coffee shop, to my subway. So I asked him why, and he said, "I'm always with you, you just don't always need to see me." And I guess he thought that was enough of an answer, so I didn't press him further. So God and I sat at the table in my favorite coffee shop and ate our blackberry coffee cake, and then when I finished my breakfast and looked up from my phone, God had left again. And he'd put his plate and mug up where the dishes go, so there was nothing left of him at my table except for the faint jingling of the wind chime in the door. And I came to associate that jingling sound with those times I'd met God in those random places. Places I go every day with no change, nothing new. And for some time I would just think about those moments. Even when my boyfriend yells at his gaming console, yells at his mom, yells at me, I just continue on until one day, do you remember this? When someone called me on the house phone, that old and battered landline, and woven in between the dial tone was the faint jingling of the coffee shop wind chime. And I picked up the phone, and it felt warm in my hands, and God was on the line, and I said to him, "Are you calling to tell me to forgive that boyfriend of mine?" And he laughed again, and it filled my heart with something pretty. And God said, "Not exactly." And I laughed at him and said, "Is God telling me to dump my lousy boyfriend?" And he laughs too and says, "I told you I'm a jerk." And we laugh on the phone for a good half hour like childhood pals, and he's not even talking, just laughing without breath, wheezing into the receiver about everything and nothing. And I hung up the phone and kicked that lousy boyfriend to the curb, and I hung up a wind chime in my own window for God to drop by. But he never has again. And sometimes I wonder if I made it all up, if it wasn't just me all along. But I'm unable to shake the sense that that's not exactly the case, so I'm still waiting for you to drop by, ask you, "Do you remember that?" And some days I look up at the wind chime and I ask, "Hey God, are you still there?" Thank you.
Hello. My name is Diana Patricia Connors. This is a poem I wrote entitled Lorelei in Lado. It begins with an epigraph from transgender video essayist Lily Alexander. Transphobes project onto us a permanent, immutable misery. It makes our suffering predictable and our deaths hardly even count. To them, the defining tragedy has already taken place. The family forms a chorus in his head. Poor, sweet Lorelei, how many hours has it been since you ate? How many times have you fed the chickens since your own stomach began to rumble? How many no thanks have you said these past weeks? It rings in his ears on the way to the creek. He knows all of what he will find there. How much blood has stained our bathtub's drain? How often has your hair clung to your reddened neck? How long must we see you do this to yourself, all at the behest of some sick confusion? Trees marked with carved lettering commemorate his mileage, with initials etched with the dullness only a safety blade can achieve. A and L. The first letter sinks newly deep. The second, nearing 10 years old, fades further still. What vicious efforts have conceded you to this? What sickness befalls you which we cannot seem to cure? What grand delusions lead you astray, sparing to the pit of the devil that which is breaking beyond repair? He'd love the icy water of the creek were it not for what it reflects. Something standing alone on the riverbank, leaves underfoot, leaves under leaves. Wouldn't be a terrible thing, he thinks, to rot here. Why anywhere else? Rot is merely a mode of change, and his fear is not in change. Why must you violate yourself in this way, leave behind what we've taught you? Why do you embarrass us, telling us what's right? Why must you betray us in your every capacity and rot yourself in motion? But he knows he would not rot now, knows he could not rot yet. It is winter. His body would only feed the vultures, not one blade of grass. I don't hate vultures, he thinks, but I can wait, and heads home thinking, come summer. His parents' screened back door jams 3 times as he tries his way through. Who has led you this way, Lorelei? Who has taken your vulnerability and spit out only contempt for us? Who have you wrapped yourself in, convinced yourself to become, convinced yourself to impersonate? He takes his headset from the top of his computer, slides it over his head, slots in the microphone. The machine's whirring drowns out his stomach's grumbling. He joins a game he plays nearly every day amidst a sea of people who play it once in their lives, passing like the trains through his hometown. He asks these strangers to call him Alec. Thank you.
Could we get another round of applause for our readers, please? Thank you all so much for coming. Our senior readings will be at 7 at the same place. Thank you.